Welcome back, guys. I'm Tela and one of the managing partners at Phoenix Team, and here with Brian Woodring.
Hey.
And we are doing a 10-part series on accessible AI, focused on the way that AI and generative AI is going to fundamentally change the way product development is done. When we left you last, we were talking about the problem of shared understanding, and we had a conversation about how we can use AI and generative AI in that space. Today, we're talking about the problem of requirements. And
so we're getting down to brass tacks now.
That's right. My good friend Brian's going to set us up on this one.
Yeah. So, we were talking about this earlier. So, we have a little bit different backgrounds. I'm a career software engineer. So I've typically been in roles where we were the recipients of the requirements. And I always was surprised because I feel like really what you should put in requirements is what engineers will need to build it. But I have been constantly baffled in my career what kind of things show up in requirements. There's this old term bike shedding, where people will argue about or hyper focus on really trivial things because they're easy. So my kind of like standard thing there is like, you don't need to tell me where to put the button in the requirements. We'll figure it out. And if it's really important that the button be in an incredibly precise location, that probably belongs in the design and not in the requirements. So really thinking about how do you express requirements in the way that optimally conveys that shared vision? Because that's really what they are, is they're a way of conveying shared vision out to the people who have to build the software. And then really thinking about how can we do that more effectively with AI?
I think that's an interesting point. What to put in the requirements? What are their usefulness? And is it about the process of creating the requirements or the requirements themselves? And I'm of the opinion that maybe, and I'm going to arbitrarily make this up, 75% of requirements that are created in a product development process establish a base. They establish a foundation. And maybe 25% are truly the unique and special parts. And is there value in establishing that 75%? And I think this is kind of a controversial topic because when we want to reach that shared understanding, there is value in achieving that base. But if we're in a big hurry, if every dollar matters, and we can arrive at that base in, say, minutes instead of months or years, I kind of feel like maybe there's something there. And I think with generative AI, that's actually a thing.
Yeah, because look, here's the thing. Here's what we know. Time is always a factor and money is always tight. Right. So the safe assumption is there's not really enough time to describe every single thing that a piece of software has to do in the requirements, right? You've really got to focus on the things that require understanding, the rules, the logic, the calculations, the things that are really distinct that otherwise you would not expect the engineers to understand how to build. You don't necessarily need to go into great detail describing what a mobile app is, right? Or what a web form is to collect data. Some of that comes from obviously standardizing that and doing as much of that through convention as possible so that you don't have to really have that conversation each time. But also, there are better ways to express a lot of those things, right? They don't have to be in the requirements. But if they do, to the extent they do, the faster and more easily and more clearly you can express them, the better, right? Still, every time you add another requirement, you're adding cognitive load for everyone else on the team who's trying to achieve shared vision.
And I think taking a personal experience from many, many years ago when one of my other managing partners, Tanya Brennan, and I worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs, we had a catastrophically awful initial start. And we had a team well-intended, but that wasn't very good at making requirements. And ultimately what happened was Tanya and I sat in a room for 2 weeks straight every single day, and we wrote requirements. And I think by today's standards, they would be potentially laughable. They were a very standard, traditional declarative software requirement specification. The system shall, there was only one picture in the entire software requirement specification. I should have brought it in for this. Maybe I'll bring it in for another one. I still have it. And the reality is that is as good a representation of a system as any that I've seen even today. Not because we did it, but because it was fast and it reflected so much of what needed to be there. Now, it was not enough. Certainly it was not enough. But it was fast. It was as complete as it could be, and it got us started. And we had many, many conversations, debates, arguments over the content of that one document that we created in 2 weeks that didn't have any pictures in it at all.
Okay. But counterpoint, because I actually was the recipient of those specific
This is a good
requirements,
point. That's
which
a
is
good
how we
point.
know each other.
That's fair enough.
I thought they were great. And here's the reason. Yes, were they missing a lot of things that we needed to build the system? Sure. What I don't think, though, is it was missing anything that belonged in requirements.
Mm.
Now, there may be types of things we didn't know to do at the time, or our methodologies didn't imply that we should do at the time, especially around design and user experience. Thinking back to that project and that deliverable, we didn't do a lot of UX work. We didn't
No.
really think about that user experience really until later, when we were almost kind of digging ourselves out of a hole a little bit, because I
That's
think
right.
we, in some cases, created some UX headaches for the end users. But when I think back to what belonged in requirements, I think those were some of the best I've seen, because it was just the things that we really
It
needed
was
to
just
know.
what we needed right
It
then.
was the specific calculations, the specific rules, the specific criteria that we knew would be successful. Trying to describe to someone how the software works, it's like trying to describe music to someone with requirements. You can't really describe it as a bunch of shell statements. You can't express
right.
the flow and how it's really going to work, but you can tell someone what it absolutely has to do to be successful. That's maybe the point. Is I think any of those other things expressed as requirements wouldn't have been successful.
And it was really interesting because inside the space that we were in, which was Department of Veterans Affairs, and it was specifically in the VA home loan program, many of the things there were a base must-have. You think about the thing that I can remember now is I will always know how the difference between a net value and a total debt bid. Why? Because we created this very unique, not available in the world of knowledge that is now available to us, either through a corpus of a large language model or through, frankly, Google. And we created a very special artifact for that. In fact, we called it the magical spreadsheet. And if I could find a copy today, I would still look at it. And it was explaining those things that were captured in the heads of our loan administration officers that had been there for decades and decades and decades. And I think we think of user stories and acceptance criteria. And I think that's still the currency of today. And I think that's still relevant today.
Sure.
But I think when we look 18 months from now or 3 years from now, I think we're going to see a whole new currency. And it's my hypothesis that all the world's knowledge is already available. I can already query it using AI and generative AI. I can summarize it. I can synthesize it. I can create user stories and acceptance criteria. We've already done this in some of our prototyping that's already happened. I think the currency of the future is with a value engineer who is very skilled with decades of experience, gathering those things that just aren't available out there. And isn't that really that 25% that we were talking about? If we've got the 75% that's the base, getting to that 25%.
Yeah, the really distinct part that you're not going to intuitively understand, that's not going to show up in storyboards or user stories, because it's very specific and it must work exactly that way. If you're going to calculate a claim or some kind of a formula, it has to be exactly that way. It's not close. There's not room for a lot of design fuzzing. It's not, hey, whatever is best for the user. It has to work exactly this way. That's where I think requirements are the best tool for the job. What we really didn't have back then were some of the storyboarding. User stories didn't exist, or they weren't popular.
That's right.
We didn't have some of the artifacts we have today. I think the best overall expression of that shared vision is going to be a combination of different artifacts. That's why I don't think it's one thing that's going to be how you express how the system needs to work.
I agree. And I think product development of the future, I don't think we've even seen yet what those artifacts will be. I think clearly today we can produce very fast with pretty good quality, especially for fields such as mortgage, honestly, such as medical disability claims examination. If you look at other pockets of the Department of Veterans Affairs, pivoting over to the Department of Justice, you can look at things like the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. the rules, the requirements, what these things have to do is all known deterministically in many cases. Now, yes, there's interpretation and there's, but these things are known. That body of knowledge is there.
Sure.
It's what's not there that we have to get to. We can get to what's there very, very fast now with these new technologies. It's what's not there. And I think it's yet to be discovered what that currency will be. We do have in our piloting with our own technology product, the idea that, all right, so let's say it is the customer interview. Maybe that's always been the currency. Maybe that's always, I'm sure if we talk to some of the legends out there, your Monty Kagans, your Steve Blanks, et cetera, it's always been that skill at customer interview. And what we're piloting right now is, all right, great. So let's have a conversation like the one we're having here. That's going to have a transcript somewhere. Let me just dump that transcript into a large language model that has some kind of an experience on top of it. And let's just make that knowledge available. Let's cull through it, pick out the good parts and bump that up against our corpus of all the world's knowledge. And all of a sudden I've got something new and different.
Yeah. And look, it can potentially even generate artifacts that might be too expensive for many cases, right? You're not going to be able to do high fidelity, pixel perfect mock-ups of every single screen in a large system, except maybe now you can, right? That's incredibly expensive and time consuming historically. Maybe you do it for a few screens, right. Maybe on the most critical user experience, consumer facing products, you would do that work. You can't do that in internal corporate systems. You can't do that in a claims management tool or a loan administration tool. That costs almost as much as building the software does. What's exciting to me is that many of these things are now affordable and in reach to people who are armed with this new type of technology.
And I love this topic because for those of you following along at home, you can go back and look at one of our articles on what we call the peanut butter and jelly sandwich experiment.
That was cool.
Which is just a profound example of the power and the weaknesses in this generative technology today. So it is very, very hard today to get a high quality storyboard out of any of the technology that at least I'm aware of. And frankly, it's very hard to get a high quality storyboard the analog way. If you have the illustrator skills on staff, if you have a high quality concept and journey for that customer and user in mind, even then it's really, really hard. And so I think this is an area where we're kind of pushing the boundaries. If you run the peanut butter and jelly sandwich experiment, what you'll find is these large language models are excellent at describing the process perfectly of how to make a sandwich. Perfect. And then you say, hey, give me a storyboard to describe this experience that it just described to me. And what you'll end up getting is hands with 6 fingers. You'll get a massive knife and a spork trying to cut the sandwich. You get a bowl.
That's not how you make a pizza.
That's not how I make them. I don't know about how they make them at your house. You'll get my favorite, which is a bowl of berries and a bowl of peanuts, as if we're having tableside peanut butter and jelly, which is also not how we make it.
Artisanal PJ.
Yeah. And that, I think, obviously we're going to see this tech is moving so fast. We're going to see maybe in 6 months, maybe in OpenAI, maybe in ChatGPT-5, right? We're going to see this already solved. But we have figured out, and this will be a great topic, I think, for segment number 5 on product design. If you do it just the right way, you can get these incredible images that would take, days or weeks to create. And, just because the artifacts we're used to creating and the language we're used to using as user stories and acceptance criteria, I just don't think that's the case anymore, right? If we go back to our days of, I guess it would have been the early 2000s, we were doing declarative shall statements, and that was pretty darn good. That was what we needed. That was the best we had at the time. And I think the best that we're going to have is going to change.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So I think that's going to probably wrap it up for us for today. This has been Tela Mathias and Brian Woodring on Accessible AI, because we believe AI is for everyone. This was part 4 of our 10-part series on how AI and generative AI is going to change the way software development and product development is done. And stay tuned next time for the problem of product design.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.